If this is the trajectory, like where are we going to be in another 15 years? It's hard to imagine.
The more I think about like the human experience, it sort of adds up. What you're doing is you're building like this foundational social layer that is a prerequisite to anything else that follows.
On Club Orange, there is no feed. You cannot go viral. The goal of Club Orange is literally the opposite of the goal of X.
A lot of the threats that we feel, the external threats that we perceive to exist in the world, I think exist simply because we don't just mind our own business and focus on, our country and our communities.
It's a honeypot for the government, which today is very pro-Bitcoin, but as we know, there's an election every 4 years. The last administration was very anti-Bitcoin. We don't know in 2028 who's going to be the president, and we definitely don't know what is going to be their stance on Bitcoin.
Hey everyone, Michael here with the Bitcoin Way podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Today on the show, I have Matteo Pellegrini. He is the founder of Club Orange, formerly known as the Orange Pill app. Matteo is one of the most interesting guys for me to talk to. We talk about AI, Bitcoin adoption, power law, and we get into a little bit of a debate that we carried over from our offline DMs into the discussion on libertarianism versus government conservatism, sort of where Matteo tends to land. Fascinating conversation, and I think many of you Treasury company bros will hate his unpopular opinion at the end, so stick around for that. You're going to really enjoy the show. Hey everyone, like I said in the intro, I have Matteo here back on the Bitcoin Way podcast. Matteo, thank you for joining.
Michael Jordan, the one and only. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to our chat. You and I have had some private messages going back and forth. We're not going to get into the debates we had, but I think a lot of fun things we can talk about. I really enjoyed our first chat. First and foremost, though, since we last spoke, you have rebranded. So it is no longer the Orange Pill app. It is Club Orange. Why don't you explain just briefly for people what it is, why the rebrand, and how that's been for you?
I mean, the main reason is because my wife kept telling me that she came out with Orange Pill app as the name. And I say, I can't let that happen. So I'm going to change the name. No, joking aside, it's true that she was claiming credit for the name Orange Pill app, but the what happened is basically there are three reasons why we rebranded. One, I kept seeing people misspelling Orange Pill app. For example, so like one time I was talking to an accountant. I was literally sitting next to the desk in front of the guy, and I say Orange Pill app, Inc., whatever, and he said, "Oh, Orange Till, Till." And then another time I was at a party, I said, "Yeah, the app is called Orange Pill app." They go in the app store and they type Orange Pill and then app UP. I'm like, incredible. So basically, only Orange was never misspelled. Everything else was misspelled. So number one, this misspelling was a problem. Number two, the length. It's a very long name. There are no successful companies with three words name. No, zero. Especially in software. And then the last point was the word pill, which for some people was a little bit of a turn off, like it's kind of like a cult. It's like, and so eventually we said, okay, let's see if we can find a better name. It took us a week, we did a lot of brainstorming, me and Brian and the other guys on the advisory board. And, we landed on Club Orange, which I think is much, much better. Obviously shorter. Club, it's club in all the languages, pretty much. Like in Italian, it's club. In French, it's club. In Spanish, it's club. Shorter. It keep orange, which is the only word that wasn't misspelled. And also, it's kind of like more of a... The other funny thing is that in the onboarding on the app, when you go and create an account, and then at some point there's a paywall, right? Because Club Orange is paid only. We never had a free trial. When you go to the part where we tell you why we charge everybody, we literally said, since day one, we decided to build a club for Bitcoiners. So the word club was always there, like lurking in the shadow, waiting to be brought into the light. And so we ended up with Club Orange, which it's shorter, it's easy to remember, cannot get misspelled. And so we rebranded November 6th, so 2 months ago. Everybody I heard, maybe they just want to be nice to me. They just say, yeah, it's a great name. And that's our final name.
Okay. No, I think it's great. I agree it's punchier. I wouldn't have guessed all of the misspellings, but maybe that's just because I was accustomed to Orange Pill app and I knew what you were saying. But I think it'll be a good move and probably gives you a bit of it's more generalized. It gives you some latitude to move, to offer new features, change the business. Like not maybe not in fundamental ways, but just some room to run in other directions. If you ever had beyond an app or anything like that. So
I mean,
I think
just
it's
to be clear, the mission is the same. Nothing has changed.
sure.
Literally, nothing has changed but the name. So different name, same mission. We might have. There's a half idea where we could open or sponsor like physical clubs. Let's say Club Orange New York, Club Orange London, Club Orange Miami, and so on and so forth. Like for example, in New York there is Pub Key. I'm sure you know about them.
Yeah.
Um, we could be like a partner. So we bring the technology. They already have the physical location, and it could become Club Orange New York. So it definitely opens the door to some opportunities that we might explore down the road. But for those listening, nothing has changed. We're still like location based social network. Go find some Bitcoin friends, find events, find merchants, and that's so different name, same mission.
Yeah, I love it, man. Well, great. Well, I'm excited for you, and you guys are always not always, but you guys have rolled out new things as the business has sort of changed and broadened its scope of events and all of these things that I think weren't originally included. And I know it's a great place for people to connect. So I'll just say I'm a member of Club Orange. I'd encourage everyone else to sign up because you don't have to deal with all of the nonsense. You're not the product the way you are with other social networking apps and sites. So strongly encourage any Bitcoiner to get on Club Orange. Matteo, I want to jump into some recent tweets you had. You and I could talk about a lot of things. Our last discussion, I don't even remember everything we covered. It was a lot. One of the tweets I saw that stood out to me relatively recently, you said, we don't need one company owning 1 million Bitcoin, which I assume is something of an allusion to Michael Saylor and strategy. We need 1 million companies owning 1 Bitcoin. Would you like to share your thoughts on? I tend to agree, but I'd love to hear why you said that. If you want to elaborate any further, and then we can dig into the sort of the significance of this.
Yeah, I mean, actually, now that I remember, last time we were on a podcast together, I think we talked about MicroStrategy, and I think my calls were pretty spot on now that the price is crashed. But this sort of like we don't need one coin with 1 million Bitcoin, but 1 million companies with 1 Bitcoin, which I think is it's pretty self-explanatory. And I mean, I've never been a fan of centralization in custody. I know Bitcoiners will tell me, well, but Bitcoin is not proof of stake, it's proof of work, so it doesn't really matter if there are concentration in custody. To which I would ask, okay, if that's the case, so do you think Bitcoin will work if one entity had 99% of the tokens? Obviously not, right? So now then you have to scale back. What about 50%? What about 20%? What about 30%? What about 10%? Now, the way I see it is although Bitcoin is a proof of work, there is no such thing as a pure proof of work. Let me explain what I mean. Because we're humans, and because Bitcoin, despite the slogan, Bitcoin is math, or Bitcoin is real estate. I don't know. Bitcoin is really a social construct that somebody came out with. We agree on the rules. Obviously, the rules can be changed, have been changed, will probably change again. So it's not something that just exists in nature, and then somebody was on a walk in the forest and found Bitcoin. No, somebody came out with the idea. And because it's a human construct, that means it's subject, as we've seen with curve theory, by the way. It's very salient. That means it's subject to human behaviors, such as politics, emotions, ideology, and so on and so forth. And moreover, because it's an economic network, in an economic network, the entity with the biggest economic mass has more influence on the network than people with less economic mass, even though, like, implicitly, it is not proof of stake, right? So let's take Sailor with 1 million coins, which I'm pretty sure it's gonna get there. And I'm pretty sure it's not gonna stop at 1 million, but let's just say 1 million, which is of the remaining supply, which is probably 17, 18 millions, is what? Almost 20%, right? So if you have 20% of the network, well, number one, you could influence the fate of hard forks and soft forks. Like, your voice count more than the guy with 0.1 Bitcoin. That's pretty obvious, right? And secondly, for example, in 2023, there have been 23,000 Bitcoins paid in fees. Okay, so not the block reward, the fees generated by the transaction. So that means the total amount of Bitcoin that was paid in fees was 23,000 Bitcoins. Now, if I have 1 million Bitcoin and I want to prevent you from using the blockchain for one entire year, it will cost me 23,000 Bitcoin. Now, let's say some game theory kicks in, maybe it's 50,000 Bitcoin. Let's say it's 100,000 Bitcoin. I have 1 million Bitcoins. You're not going to be able to outbid me if I want to fill all the blocks for 1 year. I'm not saying that's what it's going to do. I'm not saying obviously it's not in interest, but it's a risk. And the other problem is, like, if you cast decentralization, then it's easier for a government to go and grab that honeypot. If 1 million people in 100 countries have 1 Bitcoin each, it's impossible that there is no way that the government gonna coordinate and go find everybody and go get. So it's a honeypot. It's a honeypot for the government, which today is very pro Bitcoin. But as we know, there's an election every 4 years. The last administration was very anti-Bitcoin. We don't know in 2028 who's gonna be the president, and we definitely don't know what is gonna be their stance on Bitcoin. In fact, just because Trump is so pro Bitcoin, you can guarantee that if somebody on the left wins, they're gonna be anti-Bitcoin just because everything that Trump does is bad, right? So it's almost guaranteed that if the Democrats win in 2028, they're not going to be such fan of Bitcoin. So it's a honeypot for the government. It's a potential risk for the network that somebody could influence soft fork, hard fork, could pay off the developers. I mean, I don't know what's your stance on the core knots argument, but clearly, we've seen a fracture in the culture. We've seen a fracture in the ecosystem. So I think Bitcoiners are such fans of decentralization in nodes and in mining, but somehow the custody is not seen as important as the other two pieces for decentralization. And I'm like, why don't we have decentralization in all layers as much as we can?
I completely agree with that. I mean, and as it relates to core versus knots, I mean, I run knots. I'm more open-minded than I used to be on the technical implementation, or the technical implications rather of what that means. What I am absolutely concerned with is I think sort of the way that the core developers went rogue and just said, in spite of very evident resistance from my point of view, we're proceeding with this. And now the reference implementation, the most recent version of the reference implementation, is one that many people are opposed to, in that that newcomers who weren't around for this node war, so to speak, are just going to blindly accept. And I think that's a problem. So I agree with you completely there. I also obviously agree with you. I think on having a million companies with one Bitcoin is far superior to one company having a million Bitcoin. I've never understood. Well, in the last 2 years, I haven't understood the Sailor worship, and I think he said some great things about Bitcoin early on in my journey. I learned a lot from him, but I'm just unenthusiastic about that for the same reasons you described. We need layers of decentralization, and that is mining, running a node. We were actually talking about this morning on a segment that we do on our channel, where I think the amount of Bitcoin in self custody has dipped below 50% now. So we're at like 49% in self custody. Best we can tell. I don't know that we have perfect view into that. But to me, that's the wrong trajectory, right? We need more people taking self custody. We need, and here's the kicker, I think. Not only does a million companies owning one Bitcoin decentralize this, the supply and usability, I think, of Bitcoin, but it also is much easier for a small company with one Bitcoin to self-custody their Bitcoin rather than rely on Coinbase. While I'm not a fan of, like Sailor not showing proof of reserves and all that, I can sympathize that it's a large business. They're publicly traded. Sailor's not going to walk around with a cold card in his pocket securing their, 600 plus thousand Bitcoin. I understand that. A small business with a very, limited group of sort of leadership could actually take proper self-custody in the way that, like, we at the Bitcoin Way think about self-custody, the way that a Fortune 500 company couldn't. So I think that enables a lot more of these layers of decentralization, right? They all kind of build on one another. So I completely agree with that. Um, are you concerned? So let's assume then Sailor gets to a million Bitcoin. And I think that seems very likely. What are you, I'll tell you, one of my concerns is that I think there's a non-zero chance, and perhaps a very likely chance, that strategy becomes the strategic Bitcoin reserve of government, of the US government. Um, is that a concern you have, or do you think it's just sort of the power that he now holds over what implementation is Bitcoin, or what concerns you about that situation?
Well, funny enough, I think Sailor was against uh, Core Vittori,
Yeah, yeah, he had that run Knots
but
little promo he did.
it didn't really influence. So I think he needs to get to 1 million to actually have any power. But joking aside, I mean, yeah, of course, it's he has to use Coinbase or Fidelity, or obviously he's not gonna cast it himself. I wouldn't expect that to be the case for a public company. Um, Another thing to consider is that every time he buys 10,000 bitcoins, there are 10,000 people that can no longer be a whole corner. Like, every time you buy 10,000 bitcoin, there is a 10,000 bitcoin. That those bitcoins come from somewhere. Somewhere maybe had a bitcoin, they sold it, now it's in the hand of Sailor or Strategy. They're probably never gonna come out of there. So yeah, of course, the self custody becomes. That's why probably the number is dipping, because obviously we have the ETF already. Then we have Sailor just sucking out the supply. Now, obviously that's good because the price needs to go up. Because without the price going up, I almost wrote a book before I had my second child, but without number go up, kind of Bitcoin doesn't really work, right? Like, if we're completely honest, because then you have less miners, then you have less nodes, then you have less interest, blah, so on and so forth. Number go up, I think it's also why Bitcoin is winning compared to all the 20 gazillion shitcoins we have, because it's the only one that you have an expectation of number go up, so you can store your wealth and you can defend the network, right? Without that, we'll get in Bitcoin because number go up at the beginning, and maybe for many years before you realize there's also like a philosophy behind, there's a ethos. So that's the good part about him, like buying. Although when he buys, the price goes down. So I don't know how that works. Every time you announce a buy, the price crash. But it'd be funny to see if he stopped buying for a month and to see what happened to the price. But yeah, I mean, the United States, I don't know. Honestly, I don't really know if, again, the problem is that these things are in flux. Like, there's a midterm election in 6 months. There's going to be another election in 3 years. So it's hard to make prediction on what the U.S. government approach to Bitcoin is in the future, because of, obviously we have elections. I don't know if the U.S. government is ever going to go and seize the Bitcoin from a public company. I don't know if that would be a bad sign for the United States in general, not just for Bitcoin. I'm not that too worried about that. But you could say that they don't have to get the Bitcoin; they could influence him through other meaning. Also, at some point, we'll die, as far as I know. So at some point, it's gonna die, and then we don't know who's the next chairman of MicroStrategy. It might have different opinion, it might have different ideas. So I don't want to do too much speculation. I just say, it would be great if 1 million companies, 1 million, 1 Bitcoin each, for the network health and longevity.
Yeah. So you've got a front row seat to, I think, you've got a finger on the pulse of Bitcoin adoption by virtue of what you do. What's sort of your analysis of the state of Bitcoin adoption? Are we seeing, like, I know that there are new Bitcoiners coming along, for the ride every day, but is it growing sort of in a fundamentally faster way than it has been historically? Are people waking up? Are world affairs impacting people, signing up for Club Orange and adopting Bitcoin and getting more serious about the social networks that they involve themselves in?
You would think that the president of the United States endorsing Bitcoin would actually change the trajectory of the adoption, which is kind of like, when I got into Bitcoin, like 2017, 2018, I was like, oh, maybe one day we're going to have a vice president or a senator talking about. Now it's like half of Congress is pro Bitcoin, the president is pro Bitcoin, the vice president pro Bitcoin, the secretary of the Treasury, they're all pro Bitcoin. And it's funny that it doesn't really move that much the needle, in terms of, like, I think the adoption. I'm a fan of the power law from my compatriot Giovanni, and I think it's just we're stuck on that power law adoption curve, which is probably much healthier than if we went parabolic. People want this omega candle, and this like 500,000 price of Bitcoin in 1 year, which I don't think it's realistic. And I also don't think it would be very healthy for the network, because it takes time to build the infrastructure. Like, for example, obviously Lighting now, it's amazing. Lighting works so well. We have a wallet now on the app. Actually, it's 11 months old wallet. We've done, I guess, 4 million transactions now. And it never fails. But I remember when 2020, 21, if you do a transaction for like 100,000 sats, it wouldn't work on the Lightning network, right? So then it's time to mature. Now, the on-chain is great for like big transaction, but if I'm sending you $10, I don't want to wait 10 minutes, or maybe sometimes you have to wait an hour. So in fact, we stop accepting on-chain. When you buy a membership on Club Orange, you can buy on with Bitcoin, of course, on the website, because Apple and Google didn't let us do it in the app. But we use that on-chain, and then I would get email. hey, I paid for this app, but I cannot log in. And I'm like, did you pay on chain? Yes. Do you know you have to wait the blocks? Oh no. So anyway, so we removed that. So Lightning is the best by far. Like generally speaking, it's the best way to send money across the internet. It's funny. I was doing some testing for an onboarding that we're building, and we had fiat and Bitcoin. And every time I get to that page, my brain was like, "Yeah, let's do it Bitcoin because it's just one click. You get the invoice, you get a QR code, you scan, and you're done. You don't have to put the credit card number, the zip code." Like Bitcoin on Lightning is actually incredible from a UI or UX experience. It's incredible, but it takes time to mature, and there's other infrastructure that needs to be built before Bitcoin can be 10, $20 trillion assets. Like all these loan infrastructure. I'm not a fan of loans, by the way, but a lot of people are, and that infrastructure needs to develop and mature, and that's going to take years, right? So in terms of adoption, at Club Orange, we've been growing very steadily for like maybe now 2 years, and we're like 3 years old, like, which is very interesting. Like, it's a very steady flow of new Bitcoiners, and I never saw. So we launched in November 2022, so pretty much 3 years ago. I don't remember ever saw. We had some spike if there was a conference, if there was like when we launched the wallet, but I never saw some events that was external to the app that brought so many users. So I think it's like, we're on a power law trajectory, which I think is great, and Bitcoin will be $1 million in 2032 or 2031 or 2033, and it's gonna take a while. So you should lower your time preference when it comes to Bitcoin in all aspects.
Do you think that I remember talking about the power law with you last time, and I think you make a compelling case, and it's certainly held steady to this point. Do you think there is a case to be made for all your models will be broken and we do go like, is there some black swan event or something like that leads
Well,
us to deviate?
no, because people sell. I think that's the missing piece of the puzzle that people don't realize. Like we've seen in the last months, these whales from 10, 15 years ago selling a bunch of coins, like billions of dollars of coins, which that's why we're now 92 instead of 150, let's say, right? Because no matter, basically there's a relationship between price and the propensity of somebody to sell.
Sure.
So if you go up, you're going to find more sellers.
Does that change though if we reach a point where people say fiat currency is collapsing? We have like our Lebanon or Argentina moment for the dollar.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, if the US dollar collapse, obviously that would be a very different scenario. I just don't, honestly, I know people.
All else equal. Yeah.
Sorry?
All else equal, you're saying we stick to the power law in a point where people say I can't do anything with fiat currency any longer, then we have a gradually then suddenly moment, perhaps.
Yes, I just don't see that happening. I just don't see that happening
ever, or in the short or over a certain time period.
Never say never, right? Like crazy things that happened before. But like when you look back at history, if you look at the global reserve currency, the only way a global reserve currency has lost its status is through some military conflict. It was never through inflation. Like people talk about Germany and the Weimar Republic. Yeah, but the German franc, no, sorry, what was the name? The German mark was never a global reserve currency.
And also they were printing endlessly to pay debt that was artificially manufactured, as part of
Well, they printed because they had to pay the debt from World War I.
Exactly.
But the mark was never a global reserve currency, ever. It was only used in Germany. And so if you have a local currency, yes, it can hyperinflate. Obviously, there are currencies hyperinflating right now. But if you're the global reserve currency, like the British pound before the US dollar, for example, the only way to lose that status is when there is a huge military conflict. You print your way to kind of win the war. You don't win the war. And then somebody else come along and say, okay, guys, we're the global, which is pretty much what happened with the Bretton Woods agreement, right? Used to be the pound, the British pound, then the US won the war. They had all the gold, and they say, okay, now it's the dollars. And we've been on the dollar since 1945, 1947, whatever the Bretton Woods agreements was. And so if you think, obviously the US government could get into a military conflict and could lose it. As an American, I really hope that's not going to be the case ever, obviously. And also, I think as a obviously although I'm Italian and originally I've been living in this country for more than 10 years, I have a citizenship, blah, 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 blah. But objectively, I would make the argument that the American, experiment, the American culture, the American people has been one of the most positive force in the world that ever existed. And do we want China or Russia to become that force? Because at the end of the day, people like to make this fantasy scenario where there's some benevolent country that doesn't exist that becomes the global reserve currency, or that become the global the top dog, right? But the reality is that if it's not the US, it's China, and if it's not China, it's Russia. It is not going to be Denmark, or it's not going to be Switzerland, or it's not going to be Iceland. And so now I know you're not a fan of governments, so that's maybe a different subject. But as far as we know, we have governments for a long time. I think we're going to have governments for also a very long time. It's just the way humans operates. And I don't really want China to be, with all due respect, I don't really want the Communist Party of China to be the hegemony in the world. I'd rather have, with all these flaws, the U.S. government and the U.S. Constitution to be the guiding light. And so I don't really see, honestly, I don't see the U.S. dollar hyperinflate. I mean, we had COVID. I think we printed 40% of the supply in 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
Was it 40% or 30%?
Like that. Yeah, it was like $6 trillion. I think it was about 40%.
And what do we get? 9% inflation for 1 year, or 10, or call it 20%. I don't know. We had 20% inflation. The next year we had 10, and now it's 2 to 3. Now CPI is not super accurate, but obviously if CPI is 2, the real inflation is now 50. It might be 4, it might be 6, it might be, it's in the neighborhood, right? So we had the biggest printing of money since 1971 in probably 6 months or 1 year, and we didn't get inflation because we export inflation to the rest of the world. That's the case when you're the global reserve currency, and which also, for example, in my own country of Italy, we had the euro. The Eurozone had a higher inflation than the US, because in Europe we had two kind of printing. We had the euro printing, and then we had the dollar printing. There needs to be some up. And so, the US export inflation through the fact that it's the global reserve currency. And as long as it stays the global reserve currency, which again, that can only cease to be the case through a military conflict. As long as that doesn't happen, the US dollar will remain the global reserve currency, and Bitcoin will live in parallel, will appreciate. Also, by the way, you can't have a global reserve currency with $2 trillion of market cap. That wouldn't work anyway. So, even if you say, okay, Bitcoin is going to be the global reserve currency, which obviously is what I wish to be the case at some point, the market cap needs to be 20, 30, 40, 50 trillion dollars of dollars. So there's a long way to go before we get there.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I would need to think a bit on that, because I think at the end of the day, what hyperinflation, I think it's twofold, and I couldn't tell you precisely what it is, but I think on one hand, it's such a large increase in the money supply, such that people can no longer afford things. But I think it's also something like a psychological phenomenon that people simply lose faith in the currency. And so by virtue of lack of demand for that thing, that dollar, that euro, whatever it is, it hyperinflates and things become more expensive. So it might be like two levers that impact a hyperinflation event. I could see the I could see the money printer ironically not being the catalyst, because there is global demand for dollars. I could see millions and millions of Americans saying this thing is no longer working for me. Like I've lost faith in it. I can't save in it. As soon as I earn it, it's worth less a week later. And I don't think there's anything to say that that couldn't happen without a military conflict. Though I agree with you, historically, it's tended to be a military conflict. There's a new global power, and they basically get to call the shots. So we could go on that for a long time. At the risk of a sort of an unnatural break, I do want to talk to you about artificial intelligence, because you've tweeted a lot about that. One of the things you said was that AI will accelerate the realization that almost nothing online truly matters or is even true. What matters is real life, real friends, family, and the conversations we have face to face. Could you explain why will AI accelerate that realization?
I mean, because AI is gonna do everything for us online, and I mean, I'm doing things that I couldn't do like 2 weeks ago. I literally just bought an external monitor. So just to give you an idea, right? I'm 41 years old, and I've been working in software startup company since I was 19. So let's call it 20 years, right? I'm not a developer, but I've worked with developers. I've always been in the software business. In 20 years, I never once felt the need to buy an external monitor until last week, because with Claude, which is one of the AI, basically, you can have your own agent that goes around and click, 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 and does things for you, and you can train it. I'm like, this is amazing, but I want to keep an eye while I do other work. So I put a monitor so I can see what my agent is doing right now. So my agent, without going into many details, is sending message to people as if they come from me, but it's not me; it's my agent. Now, this is only gonna get better and faster and bigger. And so I think at some point we're gonna be like, oh, I got a message from Michael Jordan on Twitter, but most likely it wasn't him; it was his agent. And so what happens when most of the online activity is generated by some AI agent or bot? In my view, it's like, okay, this message is not really from him. This tweet is not from him. This video was not made by him, right? Now, if I really want to know what Michael Jordan thinks, I need to be sitting in front of you, and then I know it's you instead of your AI agent. And so this trend, which I'm kind of on the frontier because of the work I do. I need to know what's the latest model. What how can I use that to make my work easier and faster? So I can see the frontier is being pushed forward and forward and forward every month, every week, right? And so I think humans, we need to be. It's not that we need to be. I think humans thrive when we are together. Clearly, obviously. There's a book called *Sapiens*, which it goes into details why that's the case. And if I don't know that I'm talking to you when I tweet at you, I mean, for example, I get emails now that I know for a fact are written by AI. like, because I spend so much time with AI, I can tell, okay, this is not a person, this is an AI. Now I still reply as if I'm talking to a human, but I know I'm talking to an AI, right? But it's obviously, I'm on the edge because I spend a lot of time, but eventually this is going to be normal. And so at that point, I think we just go, okay, let's go to the meetup, let's go to the restaurant, let's have a dinner with my friends that I know I can talk to in real life. And I think that's what, so basically my thesis is that AI is going to push humans offline, which, by the way, humans have only been online for like 20 years, right? Like, I remember before online. I'm 41. I think you're close to my age. You probably remember before online, although in America it was earlier than Italy, but humans have been online for like 20, 25 years. And in fact, if you look at the stats, I haven't one in my pitch deck. The time spent online has been decreasing since 2023 already.
Interesting.
So I think we reached peaked online already, and that number is only going to go down and down and down because, for example, I can now have my AI agent send messages for me, 100, 1,000 messages, while I'm at the gym or I'm at dinner or I'm working out, whatever it may be. So that means my time now, I have to spend less time online and I can spend more time offline, which is, by the way, it's what humans want. Like if you go on vacation, like what do you do? Do you go on vacation to spend time online or do you go on vacation to spend time offline? Clearly, you go on vacation because you want to meet interesting people, you want to go see the museum, you want to go on a boat or skiing, whatever it may be. That's what so that's how you kind of can tell what the human spirit wants is to be offline. We have gone online because there's a lot of advantages, obviously. And so the moment that these AIs are gonna be just as good as us, we're just gonna go back offline, which is the natural habitat for humans is offline, in person, socializing, creating, working out, being in the sunshine, so on and so forth.
So you think in sort of in an ironic way, the higher tech our world gets, the less time we will engage with technology to some
Yeah, of
degree.
course. Yeah.
That's interesting. And it makes a lot of sense too. Because I think that there are like I spend all day on a computer in front of a screen. Uh and I find myself like when I go to when I hang out with my brother, who's like my best friend, one of the handful of people in my life who I can just like talk with about anything, right? Or I go to a Bitcoin conference and I meet like-minded people, sit down, have a cigar with a close friend, that kind of thing. Like that is, I'm very fortunate. I get to work in Bitcoin. I love doing what I do, but I would much rather sit down and talk with you for 2 hours over dinner than sit here and talk on a podcast with you. As enjoyable as this is, it's a much more organic conversation. And I think it's interesting because I would never have guessed though that since what'd you say 2023 we've
Yeah,
seen a change.
2023. Yeah, yeah.
I
2023.
would not have guessed that.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how like because I still go to the grocery store. I'm out and about and everyone's just head down in their phones
Oh yeah.
and it's like this. It's like it's more habitual than it is. I think anyone feeling like they're you know yielding a benefit from that. It's just the
Well,
algorithm is,
we
a
are
drug.
obviously addicted. Like we're addicted to social media. I'm too. I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm such a like I can see myself addicted to this, especially this social media platform. Um, but because when I get a like, I know it's from another human. Or when I get a reply, I know it's from another human. When I get a DM, I know it's from another human. That's why the moment my expectation is that these likes I'm getting on X are all bots, why do I care? Why do I care that 1,000 bots like my tweet? I don't care because I
Right.
care about other humans, which is still the case today. Although there's this thing called the dead internet theory. I don't know if you ever heard about it. The dead
No.
internet theory. It's basically said that, and this is before AI, by the way. some guy came up with this idea that the majority of the activity online is fake. So the internet is really dead. It's bots talking to other bots. And this is before LLM, right? This is like 10 years old theory. It's called dead internet theory. You should look it up. And I don't really care what an AI thinks of me or my tweets. I don't care. I had zero interest in knowing what a piece of software thinks about me. But I have a lot of interest of what Michael Jordan thinks of my tweet, of my ideas. That's what interest. It's also so. How do we know this for a fact? I'll give you the best possible piece of evidence. In 1994, Gary Kasparov, which was the best chess grandmaster in the history of chess, lost to a computer, IBM Deep Blue. That was pretty much 30 years ago. Now, since then, everybody playing chess knows that a computer, it's better than any humans. And yet, chess is more popular now than 30 years ago between humans. People want to know what humans' capabilities are. We do not care that there is a chess software that beats everybody. I mean, it's interesting for like a month,
Right.
especially if it's new, right? After that, okay, great. I don't care. Like, yes, my car can go from A to B faster than me because I can run 100 miles an hour. It's a useful tool, but I want to see if me or Michael, who's the fastest. That's interesting to me. What I want to see in the world, who's the fastest person in the world. By the way, I have a theory about this. Why humans are so interested in sports. My theory, which could be completely wrong, is that it's not just sports, by the way, it's also entertainment and the arts, right? Like, why do we really care about this stuff? I think there's twofold explanation. One is because, especially when there's a sports team, it's a proxy for wars. So humans, especially men, have been obviously selected for wars, right? We all have the capacity for going to war, but we don't have wars anymore. I mean, we do have, but in most people living on a chair. And so when you watch a game and there's two teams and they go against each other and one is going to win and somebody's going to get injured, it's a kind of like a reenactment of war. So that's a deep psychological there's a deep psychological relationship with that. Number one. Number two, if you say, okay, but what about the 100-meter dash? Nobody's getting injured. It's very short. There is no teams. And I think it's because humans are very interested in finding out the limits of humans' capability. Like, I want to know who's the fastest person in the world, or who's the fastest like we watch there are some sports that make no sense, like curling, right? But you see the excellence of a human being that has dedicated their lives to this specific niche movement, and we're wired to know, oh, that guy is really good at that activity. And I think it goes back, by the way, I think it goes back to war as well. Because imagine we're in peacetime, no war, and I need to know if Michael Jordan is somebody that can rely upon when war comes. Is he a fast guy or is he a slow guy? Oh, he's a slow guy. Well, maybe I should call my other neighbor. So I think that's a psychological fascination that we have, the humans have towards finding the limits of the human experience. And the same could be said, by the way, for acting and singing. Like, we want to know who's the best singer because it's also like a call to excellence. Like, oh, if she can sing like that, if he can sing like that, maybe I could also do that. We don't care that AI can make a better song than Elton John. We really don't care about that. In fact, I predict that AI music as an industry would never be a big deal ever. Um, so this is kind of my theory of why humans are always going to be interested in other humans. As long as we say humans, of course, there's robots, and that's a different subject. And the moment that the online world, it's obviously overrun by AIs, humans are just gonna log off essentially.
I think that's a pretty reasonable theory, and I think I would say war and also mating
Right.
would be another driver for this,
Yes.
because like if I see, like, I think humans are naturally competitive with one another. We sort of size each other up and that kind of thing. And if I see a guy lifting weights who is clearly, on gear, he's taken steroids his whole life, even if he's put in the work, for 20 years or whatever, I'm like, that's irrelevant to me. It's the equivalent of, like, yeah, I can't run faster than a car, but who cares? Like, that's not natural. But I want to be able to lift more weight than the guy who's also just, gritting it out, putting in the proof of work, doing the right things naturally. And I think that's just part of the human experience, the human psyche, is to sort of size one another up and try to be the best we can be, push our potential, push our limits. And unfortunately, I think this is maybe a separate topic, but some of what you've described, like the addiction to social media, I think the ability, it's one thing to size up your neighbor, your friend, to have like a healthy drive that you that's inherent to your life because you interact with other human beings. When you suddenly have access to what 5 billion other people are doing, like, that is not by design. That's not
No.
naturally
Well,
part of the human
exactly.
experience. And so
Yeah.
it leads to a place of depression instead of drive, is kind of my takeaway from it.
Yes.
So
I explicitly ban people on X. I never block. Sorry, not ban, block. If you share somebody dying or some fight, some bloody, I block you immediately. I don't want that in my feed. Um, so there is this social network called Nextdoor. I don't know if you know Nextdoor, which is for neighborhood.
yeah.
And my wife is obsessed with that social network. And every day, oh, there was a burglary in our neighborhood. Yes, I mean, if all you see is Bulgari, you think they're gonna get Bulgarized next. It just the skew your perception if you just see bad stuff online, which obviously I don't recommend. You can mute people, you can block people, and you can kind of, like, in a way, I believe in, like, curating your own worldview by just seeing things that are beneficial to you. So, for example, I follow people that obviously talk about AI because I want to see what's the new technique or what's the new model that I can learn, or maybe some inspirational stuff. Because you're gonna get, so it's something that I think most people don't realize. We're all brainwashed one way or another, but there's no such thing as living away. I guess if you live in a mountain, you're a monk. But if you live in the world, everything you watch or everything you listen is influencing your brain. And it's kind of programming as well, your brain. And so if you know that, you can then say, okay, what do I want to be? Who do I want to be? Do I want to be lazy on the couch 24/7? Great. Go on Netflix and go find this movie about smoking weed and doing that. There are stuff like that, right? Or I want to be a chess grandmaster. Okay, go watch. I promise you, go watch 100 hours of chess. People playing chess at high level. Your brain will start thinking in that way. It's very fascinating. So I used when I was younger. I used to listen to, like, Steve Jobs or maybe Musk. I don't remember who it was. Before I head into a business meeting, I would just go on my iPod, and I would just put, like, Elon Musk or Steve Jobs interview, and I would just brainwash myself. Not brainwash, like, programming my brain to be more like that guy. and you can do that. I mean, it's kind of a life hack, and you can rewire your brain every single day, depending on what you watch and what you consume, which is also the problem with this social media platform, because they also understand this, and they want you to be addicted to this platform, and so they will push on you things they know that you're going to be, oh, I need to know more about this, what happened here. And so, by the way, this is one reason why on Club Orange there is no feed, you cannot go viral, there is no likes, there is no retweets, there is only essentially DMs and group chats and funding events, because the goal of Club Orange is literally the opposite of the goal of X. As useful as X is, by the way, my life would be very different if I never found out about Twitter. But our goal is to go offline, spend time with other human beings, which it's healthy. I don't know if you know this, but the number one cause of death, it's loneliness. I don't know if you knew that.
I believe
It's
it.
not
I didn't
it's
know
not
it.
smoking, it is not eating McDonald's. Obviously that doesn't help. But this has been known for a long time. Like loneliness, it's like the number one cause of death. Like if And which is why I think in Italy, despite we have all the bad habits, we smoke, we don't walk, we eat carbs every day, we're one of the highest lifetime expectancy in the world, because we always socialize in the existing called the bar, where you go in and hang out with your friend. You When you find people in the street, you say hello, which in America is not exactly as common. So, literally spending time with other humans will, scientifically known, proven, increase your lifespan, and also will give you more energy. Like, for example, I have a meetup, obviously, once a week, Saturday morning, 9 to 11. And sometimes, I have a bad week, right? And I'm like, oh, thank God tomorrow is Saturday. I go to the meetup. I spend time with my friends. We talk about Bitcoin. We might not talk about Bitcoin. Sometimes you just talk about whatever, because at the end of the day, the Bitcoin meetup is really an excuse to spend time with your friends, with the knowledge that they've been down that journey that you also been, which is obviously very rare. And like, after my meetup, I'm like, wow, like I'm so fresh. Like I have 2 kids, I have no sleep. I sleep very little, and after the meetup, it's like incredible. Like you can feel the energy. Like humans get energy from other human beings, and 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 vice versa. Our energy is trained by monitors. Like this is like you can feel, if you wake up, you're very energized. Like spend 30 minutes on Twitter, and you'll see how you feel after that. So it's you can manage your energy to be more productive, to be a healthier person.
I Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's funny. I think everyone does it in their own way, right? Because like I don't have a lot of friends. I don't need a lot of friends. I don't really go to Bitcoin meetups, but I've got people in my life. And again, I'm fortunate to work in Bitcoin, so I get to talk with interesting people like yourself and many others all the time. But I've got my handful of people who I can rely on for good conversation, for in-person, meetups, and not Bitcoin meetups, but hanging out and discussing interesting topics. And I don't need a lot of it, I think, relative to compared to the average person, but I need it sometimes. And like my wife and I mean, I'm working at night and she's sitting there 10 feet from me, and like just having that physical presence, someone who you care about, trust, it goes a long way. So I think it's funny. I think, and this is not just to flatter you, I think you're one of the smartest Bitcoiners I've met. And I always found it interesting that you started like a social networking app. I was like, this guy, I feel like this guy could be like building the thing that like bridges, like TradFi to Bitcoin and like ushers in the bright orange future in this way. And the more we talk about it, and the more I think about like the human experience, it sort of adds up. Like what you're doing is you're building like this foundational social layer that is a prerequisite to anything else that follows. So it's kind of an interesting conversation for us to have, but it makes a hell of a lot of sense what you're doing. Like as I when I reframe it in that way.
Well, I think you should meet more Bitcoiners if you think I'm the smartest. You probably just know
Well,
me.
you know what? No, you know what it was. I think on our last conversation, we were talking about Noster. What I think so I think most Bitcoiners tend to think similarly. I think we think differently than the rest of the world, but like, you and I were batting back and forth. Like I'm a pretty hardcore libertarian. I don't like the government, and like I'm a meat eater. Like I'm like a lot of Bitcoiners in that way. I think you have some different opinions that are valid and worth discussing. It was when we were talking about Noster, and you were explaining. I think you told me you were talking to Jack Dorsey, maybe, and you were explaining that they were trying to solve a an economic problem with a technical solution. It was something to that effect.
Yeah,
Does
yeah.
that ring a bell? And I was like, that in the way you framed it, I was like, so like I like the idea of Noster. Like I keep on saying, yeah, I need to be on Noster more and more. But then I go back to our conversation and I'm like, I'm not really sure that Noster, I still think it's worth promoting. I think it's a useful tool. At the moment, it's probably as censorship resistant social media, if you want to call it that, as you can get. Over the long term, I have my skepticism, frankly, about it. Like, will it become basically a handful or one or two decentralized entities that have an economic incentive to basically run Noster relays, and the rest of the world just relies on them to, funnel things through, and they can censor you all over again. It may take 20 years to get there, but over a long enough time horizon, I could see the flaws. So that anyway, you can comment on that if you want. But my point was, I'd never thought about that. I don't think most people just shill Noster incessantly, and I understand why. I'm not knocking Noster, but I think you raised an interesting point that probably most people haven't thought of.
Yeah, I mean, it's as, as I'm Italian, and we like to be, I don't know, controversial. Like we have to be like contrarian, I guess, contrarian. Which, by the way, it's a good trait if you want to discover new things. Like like I don't know if you know the history of how this country was discovered by Cristoforo Colombo. It's because back then they said, "Oh, the Earth is flat." So if you go that way, you're gonna just end up falling off. And the guy said, no, 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 no. The Earth is not flat. The Earth is rounded. If you go that way, you're gonna end up in India, which is much shorter than going all over Africa to go to India. So the guy was obviously very contrarian, and I think Italians, in a way, we are very contrarian, which is why we end up, like, I don't want to brag, but like you can go on Wikipedia. It's like all the things the Italians have invented or discovered. It's like mind blowing because we don't like authority, we don't like rules. We really don't like rules, and so I'm more of a yeah. When I see everybody going one direction, my brain always kind of stop and ask. You probably should figure this out before you also jump on that bandwagon. Like I'm always like on a skeptical frame, which I think is a requirement to be a big cornered anyway. Because if you're not skeptical, you're not gonna start wondering if the fiat money is a good thing or not. But yeah, I mean, also is I think they I've seen some conference where they pretty much agree with my criticism. Like the relay model is not exactly conducive to decentralization, so on and so forth. We do support Nostra as much as possible because I want to support other Bitcoiners in general. Whether I think the project has a long shot or not, that's beside the point. So, for example, now when you create an event on Club Orange, it's automatically published on Nostr, where anybody can go and grab the data, and they could build technically a decentralized Club Orange app on Nostr using all of our events, which we have now the largest database. So I think we have 700 events on any given day. So we have all the conference, all the meetups, so on and so forth. But yeah, it's most people, but I think that also comes from also misunderstanding of Bitcoin, because most Bitcoiners, they will say that Bitcoin works because of the technology, which obviously is not true, because you can replicate the technology tomorrow. It's open source. You can make an exact same coin with the exact same supply cap, proof of work. Like, you can copy every single technological aspect of Bitcoin trivially. You cannot copy the economic incentive and the economic structure of Bitcoin, which is what makes Bitcoin unique. It is not proof of work. It is not the blockchain. I mean, there's literally hundreds of thousands of blockchains, right? None of them work. I think there's a misunderstanding of Bitcoin, which then leads to a misunderstanding of Nostr, because also Nostr is decentralized like Bitcoin. So why wouldn't it work? Well, because there is no token where you can buy and then sell for future at a higher price, or where you can store your wealth. There is none of that. So there is no. So without the economic incentive, you get centralization, which, by the way, kind of goes back to, if you want, our little debate about governments and libertarianism going. Like, my understanding, my view is that there are some activity that have no economic incentive, which will which humans will then say, okay, well, I'm not going to run my military because obviously I don't have time, I don't have the skills, I don't have maybe we're never going to get invaded in my lifetime, or maybe I'm in Kansas City and Mexico is never going to invade all the way to Kansas, right? But if I'm in California, I'm on the border, I say, well, maybe I should get attacked, right? But obviously that model, it's not prone to decentralization because it's highly costly, and the rewards from that costly activity, it might not be immediate, it might not even be in your lifetime. And so what ends up happening, that these activities decentralize, which is what then create the need for a government. So one other example is, for example, science, right? Like, the most scientists work on things that they're never going to see the lights of the day, most of them, because the whole enterprise of science is like, we don't know, so we have to try and figure out what things work, what things don't work. It would cost a lot of money to do this experiment and these labs. So once upon a time, there was a king, or there was the church, or there was some rich person in the city that would sponsor these little scientists. But eventually, like, for example, there's the CERN, the CERN in Switzerland, which is it's a particle acceleration that goes under a mountain, and they get this particle at the speed of light, and then they collide together to see what happens. There's billions and billions of dollars. And if I ask you, hey, would you like to donate 5% of your salary to this project, so that maybe in 50 years we're going to find out something that's going to build something again? No, you're going to say, no, I need to feed my kids tomorrow. I'm not going to take that money and give it to. And so that what causes the centralization, if you don't have an economic incentive built in. Now, if I give you another example, if I say, okay, let's say gas station. Now, I've never been to your town, but I bet there is a gas station. Is there a gas station where you live? There's probably hundreds. I don't know how big is your city. Why?
Yeah.
Because gas stations have an economic incentive built in. There are people with cars all over the place that needs to get gas. And so if I build a gas station, I don't need the government to incentivize me building a gas station. Because if I build a gas station, I will make money immediately. And so there's no need for the government to do the gas stations or the groceries, a lot of things, by the way. But there are some activity that might actually be fundamental, because if you build a gas station, but then let's take Russia, nuke your city, then your gas station is not that viable. So we need to build a way to stop Russia from nuking the city. So we need to build the army that defends your city or your country or your state, so that inside this kind of a secured space, then we can have all these free market activities. But first, you have to secure the environment. Like if I airdrop you on a jungle, what would be your first priority?
Food or shelter?
It would be okay. How do I not get eaten by a lion? That would be your number one security. Because if the moment you're eaten, you don't need food or shelter, right? So the number one priority for a group of people or for a civilization or for a human is, how do I ensure my survival? Because if there is no survival, I cannot build anything. So surviving is the number one priority, clearly. And so in my view, the criticisms that I have on libertarians is like they kind of missed it. Because you're living in America. I don't know if you ever lived abroad. But if you always live in America, you just maybe assume that this is the natural state of being. Oh yes, I can go to the grocery store. Why do I need the government? Like we can do. And I'm like, well, there's a grocery store and there is roads and there is all this infrastructure that the private market could build, because there is a government that's keeping the bad guys away from invading your town and then destroying. I mean, you don't have to be, you can just go on YouTube and see what it's like when some other countries wants to invade you and see. So for me, the criticism is like, okay, the state needs to set up the perimeter in which we can play inside that perimeter without the fear of being invaded by the gangs, by Russia, by whatever. And in that box, we can play the free market. There is no free market if you don't have that perimeter of safety. That's kind of my criticism of the libertarian or anarchist, whatever you want to call it.
And that's why. So I understand what you're saying. I think the fundamental flaw is that we have a preconceived notion of what that government needs to look like, and it's constrained by what we know today. And I assume you would agree that our federal government is out of control large.
Of
Is that
course. Yeah. I'm not for big government, obviously.
and so I think most people are like, well, yeah, but without the government, without the federal government or what have you, then yeah, we don't have that safety box for the free market to operate in. And I think that practically, if government is just an emergent phenomenon, it should exist to it should exist to protect our natural rights, our God-given rights exclusively. And I think you can make a case that it's hard to organize, an army, like, is an example for protection against other nations. However, I also think that, and you can make a case for that. Our founding fathers, by and large, were not in favor of a standing army. So, for what it's worth, like the United States was not designed for a central bank and a standing army and a lot of the things that we assume to be natural. The other thing I guess I would say is um, that we have the ability to operate. I think there are a lot of these problems that can be resolved at such a smaller level, states, local governments, what have you, even in today's atmosphere of, if you view Russia or China as a threat. I don't. The only reason I think we tend to have external threats today, like in the United States, is because we mingle in everything. Like we touch if we just remove tariffs, if we said we're gonna like free trade, we want to be friends with people the way China has. I mean, China hasn't shot a bullet, on another country in 50, 100 years. I don't know. It's been a long time, right? And everyone's trading with them, and they've overtaken us in trade because people are less inclined to trade with us the more interventionist we become. you don't generally want to attack a nation who is providing immense value to you. And so my sense is if we just allowed the free markets to operate generally, that in itself is something of a safety net. Maybe you could argue, yeah, but we've got resources and they're still going to want to come for us and bomb us, or okay, like maybe so. And maybe that's where like some role of government steps in. But in general, I think a lot of the first of all, I think a lot of the threats are boogeymen. I don't think I think China's only a threat to the extent that we continue to poke and prod them. I think that's a made up threat. I think Putin is only a threat to the extent that we continue to mingle in foreign affairs to the extent that we do. Not to say they're good guys. Like I'm an equal opportunity hater of politicians. But a lot of the threats that we feel, the external threats that we perceive to exist in the world, I think exist simply because we don't just mind our own business and focus on, our country and our communities and being productive and trading freely and all of these things. So I just tend to
Yeah,
assume that I tend to imagine a lot of these concerns dissipate quickly in the
it's
absence of our own interventionism.
it's funny the way you put it, because as somebody that comes from Europe, I would I would I'll promise you that the US minding their own business would have led to a huge catastrophe for pretty much everybody on planet Earth. Like, I
In what
understand
in
your
what
point of,
in what scenario?
yeah, I'll get to that. So obviously I understand your point of view. We have done all these like the forever war. There's a lot of, obviously we need to get into that. And obviously the US has made a lot of mistakes. There's no denying that. Mistakes that maybe were incentivized by the military industrial combat. That's a different story. I would just bring you a perspective where in 19, maybe you're not a fan of democracy. I don't know. I think democracy
Of
is
what?
of democracy, but I think democracy has been the best of the worst system. Let's put it that way. But if it wasn't for the U.S. government, the U.S. Army, it's basically sacrificing hundreds of thousands of teenagers, the Nazi would have won World War II, would have conquered all of Europe, probably would have conquered Russia, and then you would have had a guy as diabolical as Hitler with nukes if the US minded their own business. Which, by the way, I'm sure you know the history better than I do of the United States. The US wanted to mind their own business in World War II. That was the policy. And it basically, they didn't want to come in, and there's Pearl Harbor and this conspiracy theory. That's beside the point. But what is undeniable is that if it wasn't for the United States government invading Omaha Beach on June 6, 1946, the Nazis would have taken over Europe, including my own country. I probably wouldn't be alive. My grandfather was, anyway, in war. What it doesn't matter. So it's easy to say in 2026, oh, the US should mind their own business, without kind of seeing, okay, but what would happen if that was the case? Which, by the way, I am 90% agreeing with you. We shouldn't go around and bomb people. But there are some, obviously, as World War II have taught us, there are some moments in history where the US, if it minded their own business, would have ended in a catastrophe of who knows, like. And then at some point, the Nazi would have, of course, wanted to invade the United States anyway. Like if the Nazis have taken England, which they already took all of Europe, at some point they would have gone and tried to attack the United States. So it's kind of inevitable that you cannot mind your own business, especially if you have all the resources and all the power that comes with being a country as big as the United States. Because at some point, now, who can mind their own business? Iceland or Switzerland. Because nobody's going to invade Iceland or Switzerland because there's not much there. So they can be neutral because nobody's going to bother them. If you're China or Russia, which, by the way, these are huge countries, right? huge country, with huge population, with huge resources. There is no such thing as minding your own business. You can do it for maybe 5 years, and then there's a new president in Russia that wants to extend Russia and then goes invade Ukraine, and then there's NATO, and then there's Europe. So it's easy to say the US should mind their own business, which obviously I agree in general, without kind of realizing what would be like. We don't live in a vacuum, like power is kind of like zero-sum game. And if that power is not taken from the United States, it will be taken from Russia. I mean, look at Greenland. Like, Greenland is a good example, right? We want it, Russian want it, Chinese want it. At some point, somebody's going to get Greenland. Do we want to be the United States or Russia or China? Obviously, I want the United States. And so, if you're a country like Switzerland, you can be trading and give me your money. We have the bank. We don't tell anybody about the bank because it's a small country. There is no ocean. There is no geographical interest there. But if you're the United States, it's basically impossible to just mind your own business and expect to be left alone.
I guess I'm obviously not going to sit here and defend Hitler, but did you know that Hitler came to offered a peace treaty to the UK, to Britain, like a dozen times in the matter of a year or two before the US entered the war? So you could probably still find another example from history, but Churchill said no.
I know there's now this revisionist history that Churchill was the bad guy. And
No. I'm not even saying that. Maybe he felt like he had a compelling reason to continue fighting the war. I'm just saying I don't necessarily take it as a given that the end goal was just world conquest. The way that, to your point, still, the valid point is that you could point to other world leaders throughout history.
He did conquer all of Europe. He did conquer all of Europe, right? Beside the United Kingdom, I think Sweden. Why,
but I guess my question is, would the conquest have continued? If you're put in a position where you say, hey, we're done, we want peace, and they say no, and the object is to keep, you have to continue to proceed fighting and taking out your enemy who's agreed not to enter a peace agreement, then conquest, is the only option. How do you prevent the attacks from continuing? So again, I'm not trying to I'm not trying to defend. I'm not trying to revise history. I'm saying you can go to ChatGPT and say, hey, did Hitler request a peace agreement with Britain?
Yeah, but that doesn't mean much, right? That doesn't mean much. Just because you request a peace agreement doesn't mean you're going to follow through.
No, not necessarily, but it wasn't. But the opportunity wasn't given. So I'm not saying that Churchill was the bad guy. I'm not saying that Hitler was the good guy. I'm not saying that anyone was. I think in general, people are people, and that there are people who play important, good roles in history, and then under different circumstances, they do terrible things that completely, are objectionable to even the values they'd held 5 years earlier. I think our founding fathers are great examples of that. And so I guess my point is, I think to your point, because we can go on about this all day, I think we generally agree. I think that the size and scope, where, I told you, philosophically, I can't evade anarcho-capitalism, because I think anything less than that philosophically, so just hear me out, philosophically, anything less than that is conceding that someone has, either now or in the future, as the power inherently expands, because that's what people in power do, rights, or the ability to take your natural rights away that you are God-given. I think practically, not philosophically, where I stand is, I agree with you. I think that government is probably going to emerge on some level. Then the question just becomes, how do we right size it to accommodate the necessary evil that it is, to meet the needs of perhaps, defense that, individually or as families we probably can't achieve, or not as easily. Because some of those things, to your point, require some level of centralization if you want it on a particular scale. And let's say for a second we agree that there's on what the scale of self-defense of our country is, and it requires centralization in the form of government. How do we then achieve that level of government, and not one with $38 trillion of debt, forever wars, poisoning our water supply, poisoning our food, in bed with big pharma, in bed with big food, like military industrial complex, all of the other things. It's a hard thing to balance. And I think maybe where I end up is like, this is just the way the world's always been. And we're gonna have like sort of fourth turning style, like, revolutionary periods, and we're gonna revert back to something more sane. And then weak men are gonna create hard times, and like, we kind of go through this, that like maybe that's just the human condition.
I mean, the older I get, the more I notice that things don't really change. To be honest with you, like
I agree.
it's funny how when you're 20, you think, oh, this ideology is going to change everything. We're gonna go and protest. Which I'm not saying clearly there's been an ideology that it's changed the world for the good and for the bad, right? And obviously, Bitcoin, by removing the money printer, in my view, is the best chance we have of right-sizing the government, which I agree 100% with you. I don't think you'll find anybody in the United States, even the most hardcore liberal, to say, yes, the government should be bigger. They're all against some part of the government, like, oh, the industrial, the big... yes, for sure. For sure, the U.S. government has been like inflated to levels that are almost unimaginable. I think, yeah, one way is to remove the money printer. I mean, it's the obvious. It's the biggest weapon they have. At the end of the day, because with the money they control everything. They can't send 330 million people to guard 330 million people. Clearly, like there's not enough manpower to go and but they could just print money, and you have no voice, you have no vote, you have no saying, and you don't even know what's happening. That's like, we all, as Bitcoiners, we all try to orange pill other people. And when I talk about inflation, they blame COVID, or they blame Russia, or they blame this, or they blame that. Almost nobody says, yes, of course, they print money. Of course, there's inflation, which is obviously like very easy to explain. And so I think that's also why I'm very passionate about Bitcoin, is because I think is by far the best and probably easiest path that we have to reducing the size of the government, where it does what it's supposed to be doing, which is not controlling everything, which is not like interfering with every single thing. And so, yeah, I mean, that's why I'm all in Bitcoin, physically, spiritually. I mean, career-wise, I mean, I'm all in Bitcoin. If Bitcoin doesn't work, it's gonna be, I'm going down with a ship. And so, yeah, I think Bitcoin is on the path of achieving. I mean, when you think about it, like Bitcoin has already infiltrated the government in a way, right? Like we think it's like humans have this kind of like blindfold things where you get fixated on one thing, and then you think, oh, this is so obvious. Like, for example, if you have vegan friends, they say, yeah, of course everybody should be vegan. Or if somebody's Muslim or whatever it is, oh, of course. But if you actually step out and you realize that in 15 years, 16 years of Bitcoin Live, we went from like an email with a PDF attached, literally, to, I mean, nation states. So one nation state is using Bitcoin, they're buying Bitcoin. The US government, which is the biggest, most powerful nation state, I mean, when you think about it, it's actually insane. Like, I don't know if Satoshi's still alive, I don't know if Satoshi's still alive or if it is, if he's still paying attention. But the fact that we went from a PDF to literally the sitting president of the United States promoting or even talking about it, it's insane. I mean, where are we gonna? So, if this is the trajectory, like, where are we going to be in another 15 years? Like,
Right.
it's
Yeah.
hard to imagine.
I completely agree, and that's a great way of framing it. We went from a PDF to the sitting president of the largest or most influential nation on earth talking about Bitcoin. I think I think maybe here's the deal. Like we talk about self custody, run a node, like all the fundamentals of Bitcoin all the time. Like if you follow our channel, like that's what we're talking about. I think I want to wrap this up. I obviously have one more question to ask of you, but I think what I would encourage people to do is I think about this more and more. Seriously, go to Club Orange, sign up, pay for a membership, do it, because it's the ultimately, to your point earlier, it's the social layer that's going to continue to make Bitcoin work, because Bitcoin is not a natural phenomenon. It is, a technology. It's obviously malleable, as we talked about with the core knots debate and everything else going on. And I think too, Bitcoin, I don't believe in fix the money, fix the world. I think that fixing the money changes the incentives. And I think ultimately humans need to respond and take action on those incentives. And so to the extent that people can find others who are seeking truth, looking to better themselves. I mean, it's an iron sharpening iron kind of situation. I think when it comes to like something like Club Orange, like those are the people you need to be mingling with, engaging with, because I think it's going to create a better version of you, which is going to lead to a better version of your children and your grandchildren. And I think at the end of the day, human action is the only way that the bright orange future is really even possible. So it's really a double-edged sword. You can't take either for granted, Bitcoin or what is required of us as humans. Matteo, so my last question is always an unpopular opinion that you have. You get bonus points if you offend some Bitcoiners.
I mean,
You can't say you hate libertarianism. Find something else. They know that.
I don't really hate them. By the way, I really don't hate anybody, to be honest with you. As a Christian, you're not supposed to hate people, but I mean, I thought I offended enough people already. I don't know. I mean, okay, here's the thing. And maybe people that listen to your show, they already know this. A realization that I had lately is that it's about Bitcoin treasury companies, which all of them, including MicroStrategy, should be trading a negative MNAV. There is no logical explanation. There is no logical reason why an asset that is encumbered, which is an asset inside a Bitcoin treasury company, is encumbered by taxation, regulation, execution risk, human risk, right? So you take an asset, you put it in a box. That box has all these limitations, and then you have the asset itself that you can buy, even an ETF, right? Or you can buy on an exchange and put in self custody. When you compare those two assets, one that you owe yourself and one that is inside a box with all the extra layers of limitations, the asset inside that box should always trade for less than the asset itself. And I actually had this conversation with somebody that's like I'm not gonna name names, but somebody that's really like very knowledgeable on this stuff. And he said, yes, I mean, you're 100% right. I don't understand why a lot of Bitcoiners think Bitcoin inside a company should be trading at a higher valuation than a Bitcoin in cold storage. So yeah, I don't know how controversial it is. I guess now that the price have crashed, it's not that controversial. But if you still think that strategy should trade at 3x MNAV, I think you're honestly, you shouldn't be trading this stuff.
So I've only thought about this as long as you've been talking about it, and top of my head, I couldn't possibly agree more.
Yeah.
It's the same reason, Matteo, why when you go buy physical gold coins, like it's more and more expensive
Yep.
to buy smaller denominations because
Yes.
you can ensure purity, you can take self custody, you can
Yep.
actually use it. Like it has all of the attributes that you want from gold. The same thing is true. Like when you pay a premium to buy non KYC Bitcoin, right? Peer to peer,
Good point.
because all of the advantages of what we talk about in Bitcoin come with that. So the further you get from that pristine asset that we talk about, which treasury companies are down the line, even to your point, from ETFs or custodial Bitcoin or
It's
anything
the
else.
worst of the worst because they have
Yeah,
all these extra layers. So you take Bitcoin and you add all these layers of risk, execution risk, regulation risk, taxation risk, keyman risk. Why would
yeah,
that asset be trading more than the Bitcoin on cold storage or ETF, you name it? The more risk you add, the less should be valuable. And then they say, well, but they can leverage the balance sheet to buy more Bitcoins. Doesn't mean anything. Then
yeah,
first of all, they issue shares and you can only buy shares. So first of all, they destroy the shares by issuing the diluting the shares. And second, you're still buying an asset that is still unencumbered. Doesn't matter if they have 1 or a million. In fact, as we've seen, MicroStrategy, they have been buying, they have more, so they have more Bitcoin now than 1 year ago. Yes, yet the MNAV, it's much lower. So the fact that they can buy more doesn't mean what they have today should be worth more than a free Bitcoin.
yeah. The further you get away from non KYC peer to peer purchase Bitcoin, the less valuable it should be. And
Yes.
that's what treasury companies are.
Yeah.
You're gonna, yeah, I think with our audience, I think you'll have a mixed bag of people who are offended by that, and then you'll have some people who are, cheering you on. I'm with you 100%. Just top of my head, haven't thought about it any further than sort of the analogy I gave, but I think you're onto something. Matteo, tell people where they can find you, where they can learn more about Club Orange, where to sign up, anywhere you want to send them.
Yeah, I mean, it's the website is cluborange.org. The app is Club Orange. You can download on the App Store, Google Play Store. We have a web app. You can get the APK from the website if you can run on your Graphene. And I'm very reachable. Excuse me, on the app. It's my name and last name. I obviously answer all the DMs on the app, and sometimes I check my DM on Twitter. So if you on Twitter is Matteo Pelleg, but you can just type my name and you'll find me.
Yeah, we'll link to it in the show notes as well. Matteo, always a blast talking to you, man. Thank you so much for your time. We'll catch up again soon, and hopefully I'll see you in April. You going to be in Vegas?
Yeah, 100%.
Awesome. We'll see you there then. Thank you.
Thank you, man.
Cheers, man. And that's a wrap. Again, I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Matteo. I know I love talking to that guy. He's just awesome. Go do me a favor. Sign up for Club Orange right now. It's not expensive. It's a great way to meet other Bitcoiners, support a Bitcoin company. You're doing some awesome things, and you should go follow Matteo on X as well. He is an open guy, so DM him if you got a question for him or anything. Do me a favor, if you're enjoying the show, if you like this episode, give us a like, subscribe, comment, share it with someone who you think might be interested. Anything to feed the algorithm, we would most appreciate that. And of course, if you need help taking your Bitcoin into proper 100% self-custody, go to thebitcoinway.com/podcast. We can talk you through in a 30-minute welcome call how we'll help, our philosophy. It'll all make perfect sense. And we can also help you while you're talking with us on online privacy. We have privacy phone setups, and we have a Plan B residency option in Panama as well. Everything you need for a self-sovereign life. Until next time, stay safe, stay sovereign, and remember the yield on Bitcoin is freedom.